Okay.
KZMB All Zombie Radio.
Hi, I'm Punky Brewster, and I'm here with Aiden, YouTube channel name to be determined. And we're bringing you Zombification Education 101, an introductory course. Today's movie is Dawn of the Dead. And no, I'm not talking that shitty Zack Snyder remake in 2004. I'm talking the original 1978 George Romero masterpiece. Heavily produced by Dario Argento, a name you might be familiar with if you're really into Suspiria. Which, of course, is like the movie that everyone's like, you guys should do Suspiria. No one's heard of that. Everyone's heard of that. There's
Never
like a
heard of that.
bajillion YouTube videos on it. There's a bajillion YouTube videos on this movie also. We're recovering ground that's been covered a million times. We're unoriginal. You should probably unfollow us at this point.
Make sure you leave us a horrible comment telling us that we're pieces of absolute garbage.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. If you could just just leave me a really scathing review on how unoriginal I am. Thank you. I would enjoy that. I wouldn't. I'm very sensitive. I'll probably cry. Anyway, moving on. So, Dawn of the Dead, Aiden. What do you think?
Okay.
Oh, tread carefully, my friend. This is my favorite movie of all time.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, shit. Okay. This is going to be interesting. Okay. So, you're going to hate me. I didn't hate it. Let me preface.
I'm going to hate you. Oh, my God.
I did not hate it. But it was also not my favorite. And I was like, I thought it was a little long.
It is long. Which version did you watch?
I watched the version that I found available to me on YouTube.
Okay, fair. There's more than one version available on YouTube.
Okay, well, it was 2 hours and 7 minutes long, which is what IMDb says.
That's the original cut. There is an extended version that's 2 hours and like 34 minutes long or something like that.
Okay, and I think maybe the reason why it wasn't as good for me as I wanted it to be could have been due to high expectations, because this is kind of the one I always hear about being like the pinnacle, the everything. And I was like, what's happening? Why do all these people have the aim of a goddamn stormtrooper? Why are we throwing pies in the faces of the zombies? What's going on? Like, so I had a lot of things which we'll delve into, but I was just meh. And I don't want to like say too much and get ahead of anything, but
okay, no, that's okay. I will say maybe you would like the Dario Argento cut better. It is shorter and cuts out a lot of the comedic parts because he felt like Italian viewers would not understand it.
Okay.
So,
and I'm open to watching the other cuts, even like the extended cut. I will say the main thing I always hear about this movie is that it's in a mall. And I was kind of surprised that it took so long for them to get there. Because I remember I stopped it to go, like, I don't know if I went to the restroom or grab a drink or something. And it was like a half hour in and they still weren't at the mall. And I was like, damn, is this the right movie? And then they got there like the next, 5 minutes. But I was like,
yeah, a lot of world building that happens at the beginning. Okay. All right. Well, I don't fault you for having your own opinions, Aiden. You're allowed to have them. They can be wrong. It's fine. Anyway.
You're supposed to be my professor, so educate me.
I'll educate you as to why this is the greatest movie. All right. So, Dawn of the Dead 1978 stars 4 protagonists that we follow. Stephen, Peter, Roger, and Francine, or Fran. Francine is played by Galen Ross. Roger is played by Scott H. Reininger. Peter is played by Ken Foray. Stephen is played by David Emge. Yes. So, our movie starts off with Francine, who works in a news station. She's huddled up in the corner against some carpeted wall, which is just so very 70s, and she is having a nightmare. She awakes to the real world nightmare that has surrounded her, which is the dead now walk the earth. I believe this is supposed to follow pretty tightly close up to the end of Night of the Living Dead. Is technically a sequel, but there's no direct correlation other than the dead are walking the earth. Anyway, same rules apply, and we do see some of the same kind of elements, which I'll get to in just a moment. Francine is at a newsroom. She works behind the scenes, and there are two men in front of the camera discussing the dead walking the earth and how to kill them and what is happening. Her boyfriend, I use that term loosely because he's just her man some of the time, Steven, enters the newsroom.
That's my sign for Steven's a dumbass, but continue.
He's not great. He's not great. Um, he enters the newsroom and tells Francine that they are leaving at 9 p.m. Get to the roof. I'm flying the chopper out of here. He's the traffic guy. That's why he has the chopper.
Get to the
France-
chopper.
Francine fights with her boss about the fact that he's including rescue center data on the news that is no longer valid and that he could be sending people to their death. Super cool. And then everybody gets into a really large argument. The sound balancing is not great at this point in the movie, and so there's a lot of screaming, and you don't really know what's happening. So there's that. Um, anyway, you also follow Roger and Peter, who are two men that work for some sort of paramilitary group. Is it clearly explained? Are they police? I don't know. Anyway, they're raiding a building looking for some men. I'm going to leave it at that because there is some foul language used to describe those men. Anyway, they're looking for these men. It's like someone's held this building hostage, like gangsters, I guess.
I was so confused.
It's a little confusing. Anyway, it was mainly an excuse to use really cool gore effects and really set up the story that while the people on the news are telling you that everything's fine and the government has control, it's very clear that there's no control. Also, why are we wasting our time with this apartment raid when the dead are walking the earth?
I also want to say about this part, like, I was wondering because the scene um where they're discussing like the news, like the segments that we see from the news, just the way it was staged and how the conversation was being had, it reminded me a lot of the premiere of The Last of Us. Like, so I think maybe they drew like a lot of inspiration from that. Do you remember, like, you know what scene I'm talking about? Like when they show like
Yeah,
segments.
the two gentlemen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it seemed to be staged pretty similarly. So I was wondering if that was maybe like a they
I'm
drew.
sure. I am sure it grabbed inspiration from this. I mean, Romero is considered the godfather of zombie films. These are iconic images
Right.
that are included. So like I don't doubt that they gathered inspiration from that. I mean it's why Kirkman joked about there being a space spore cuz like in Night of the Living Dead they drill into that comet or whatever and that's what they're like concerned did it. So a lot of people have gathered a lot of inspiration from it. I I found the news pieces to be interesting because they do help with the passage of time, but also with this kind of this broader storytelling of like the world is not okay, even though our people fall into kind of almost a hypnosis into believing that things are fine, right?
Right. And I kind of liked how, because we really only get that at the beginning, and then they get like a little bit of like the connection, as they go on. But it was to me a nice carryover from the previous one.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that was
Night
like,
of the Living Dead. That's where they gathered the bulk of their information was by listening to the radio
so I
and
kind of
watching the
liked it
TV
as a
specials.
transition
Yeah,
into this, and also, which I think this was around this time. I could be jumping the gun a little bit, but all basically like for lack of a better word, all the rednecks that were like going out hunting him or whatever. And they were like, I bet they love this or whatever. Like they're
so,
probably not even mad about it.
yeah. I'm gonna get to that in just a second because that's one of my favorite like holdovers. Um, so They're raiding in the apartment complex. Wooly, one of the men that they're with, goes absolutely insane and starts shooting everyone, which results in a very gory scene in which a man's head is blown off. Also, he's killed. During this period of time, Roger ends up entering an apartment, and there being the undead there. This is kind of our intro to what's going on in the outside world outside of the newsroom. These undead attack the men that are in there, and luckily they're able to fend them off. However, Roger is feeling sick to his stomach and runs into what I thought was a basement, because that's what it looked like. It looked like a utility sink that he's about to throw up in. Anyway, that is when Peter comes on the scene. He is also in that room, potentially hiding. I'm not really sure. He is intimidating, to say the least. Mask on, comes out from behind a sheet. You're not alone in here. Um, anyway, upon their discussion, in which Roger shares that his friend has a helicopter and they are leaving at 9. So we can assume that phones have worked up until this point, because somehow Steven got a hold of Roger to tell him this. They obviously came up with a rendezvous point as well, as we find out shortly thereafter. At this point, a priest comes out from a storage closet. I don't know. And he's like, hey, I gave last rites to these people. And they're not gonna bother anybody anymore. I don't know what. Anyway, they're clearly gonna bother people because they're dead, but they're undead. And so, anyway, a bunch of these paramilitary guys go down there. They're going to go break into this basement. And as they do, a bunch of the undead flock out, leaving these men to just run. So they just run. And anyway, Roger and Peter end up down there. And we're introduced to a very solemn scene in which it's almost like a storage unit, because it's like a cage in a basement. So that's how like storage units have looked in like the old apartment buildings that I've lived in. And there are a ton of men and women down there who are undead, who are eating uh pieces of people. And it's
It
gruesome.
was
The special
it,
effects in this were gross.
yeah, that one zombie was totally eating that dude's leg like he was at the KFC.
It was like a turkey leg.
Yeah,
he was
he's
it
giving the
was
hell.
gross. It was gross, and I love that stuff, but it was disgusting. Um, so anyway, Peter ends up shooting these people kind of one at a time, and Roger ducks in and shoots someone who's clawing at Peter's boots. It's really solemn. It kind of gives some relationship building to the two of them. You can tell that they're now like in this together. They've lived this horrific evening together, and so they now have a special understanding. Um anyway, we flash to Francine and Steven are leaving, and they end up flying to the rendezvous point where they are going to meet with Roger. And there are some police. See, this is where I get confused, because I'm like, were those guys police, or were they just pretending to be police?
I feel like everything that happened before they got to the mall for me was very like I'm not really sure what's going on, and not like in a necessarily like a bad way, but I was just like,
I
and
get
it was
it, because it
everything
sells.
happened too quick to like even. It was like I was like, are they? And it was like by the time I even like could finish that thought, something else I was questioning. So
It sells the whole like chaos of the downfall of humanity, right? Like you wouldn't know what was going on, because everything would be happening really quickly, and unless you were there for that moment, like you wouldn't really know. But anyway, whoever's manning this station, and the reason they stop is because they need to gas up the chopper before they can leave. Someone has been murdered there, and that's who Steven finds, is that this guy has been murdered. These guys show up, and it's kind of like this standoff between, luckily Roger and Peter roll up at this time, so it's a standoff between both sides, and you're like, what's going on? And they kind of leave it as like, well, mutually assured destruction, so let's just both leave. And I love there's like this weird interaction between them and these like police officers, because they're like, well, where are you going? And they're like, oh, we're gonna get on a boat and go down the river to the island. They're like, what island? Any island. I just love that. It was so funny. It's like, well, yeah, sure, like any island, right? Just like get out of there, give it a shot. Way to go, guys. Um, so anyway, it just kind of showcases the downfall of society, right? Like you don't only have to worry about the dead, you also now have to worry about humans. Anyway, all four of them get in the chopper. Francine expresses some concern about the fact that there is now a new man that's coming with, and who is this guy? We don't know him. Roger vouches for him, and it is going to burn up a little more fuel than it would otherwise.
I want to say something real quick about the scene where they get on the helicopter and that guy's talking to him, right? I'm pretty sure it's the same guy who's like any island or whatever, but he has one of my favorite lines in the movie, which hold on, let me put it in my notes. And it's really mainly for the delivery and the follow up, where he goes, "You guys got any cigarettes?" And then aggressively chews on his gum.
Yep.
He's like, I don't know why that hit me,
It was
but
so good. It was so good. Also, I love the fact that they're all like, no. Even Francine. And then they get up in the air and they all light cigarettes. Except for Peter, who just looks over at Francine and smiles like, I see. I loved it. Because it just showcases like you wouldn't trust people who aren't your own. So what do you owe that guy? Not even a cigarette, apparently. Anyway, so they fly, and now we enter like they've flown overnight. So we see that Steven's starting to get sleepy. He's like nodding out, and it becomes daylight. And we see this is where we get the showcase of the hunters. All right, so we're kind of brought back to the end of Night of the Living Dead, where there's all of these hunters that are out hunting the dead, and they're all in like their camo, and they're the good old boys. They're yeehaw and whatnot. It's ridiculous. It's so over the top. It's such a northern depiction of the South, which go figure.
But as someone who lived in the South, is it that far off?
I mean, it depends.
Well, I guess it depends where you are. This also has another one of my favorite lines in the movie where there's those two hunters and they're on the hill and they're shooting at the zombies. And that dude's just like audio commentating the whole thing. And he's like,
got him.
"Oh, I got him. Oh, I missed." And I'm like, "Thank you for that, sir."
I did enjoy that. It's quite good.
Thank you for that recap, sir.
It's quite good. It's a weird switch in perspective because like you're following the antagonist and then or the protagonist, and then all of a sudden we're down on the ground with these guys. It's weird, but I like the tie-in. I really enjoyed the tie-in to the previous movie. Anyway, they end up having to stop again for fuel, and they find an area where they land, and it is like a really small hangar, I guess. There's not much there. And Roger stays with the plane and fuels it, and Steven and Francine head to the hangar to check out if there's anything there, which why are you all splitting up? But and then Peter heads into the little like office building that's there. The office building has an out of order coffee machine, which Peter slaps on the side, and suddenly it's back in business, and the man's just gonna enjoy a cup of Joe. Francine and Steven end up in the hangar, and they end up hearing gunshots. Um, Roger, Roger, while fueling, is not quite attacked because this guy doesn't make it far enough, but a zombie comes up and gets hit in the head by the helicopter blades.
That was my favorite kill.
It's a really great kill. We'll come back to it because there's a little bit of backstory to that. Steven, I guess, ends up looking for Peter or seeing that Peter, like, that there's a zombie coming in to where Peter is. He shoots at the zombie. He's not trained like Roger and Peter are. He's just a traffic news reporter. But he shoots at one of the zombies and he almost hits Peter, which Peter's like really not happy with. It's clear that there is some need in Steven to prove himself as a man. it happens throughout the movie. He is feeling very insecure in his masculinity, apparently. And this is just one of many things that Steven does that is just super stupid.
2 words: stormtrooper aim.
He is not great. Stop shooting at things, Steven. You're not good at it. Just don't do it. Anyway, they get back on the chopper and they end up finding a mall, which they decide they're going to land on top of. And they look through the skylights and find that there is a room filled with water and food from the government, like as though this mall was going to end up becoming one of the rescue centers.
So this was one of those moments that made me kind of like made my mind wonder a bit, I guess, as to like, is there more to this story as far as, because it seems like, you know, that was something, like you said, that was like had been prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it made me wonder if, because obviously, you know, there is the space spore thing in the last one, but I was wondering like, was there more to the story? Did like certain people know this was coming? You know what I mean?
I
Like,
don't know. I don't know. It's really interesting. The events of Night of the Living Dead occur, and then the government's still in control, and they start sending out like FEMA, you know,
Mhm.
to do like these areas, these humanitarian efforts. And did they ship these things to the mall thinking this will be one of the rescue centers, and then it ends up becoming overrun?
Mm. Well, so how many days are we into it, or is that clear?
I It's not officially stated.
I mean, as someone who's seen these movies way more than I have, what would be your guesstimate? Like,
It seems like maybe it's been like a year or two. I don't really
oh,
know
really?
though.
Okay,
I don't
I
really
was
know.
thinking. I mean, just
It
as
could
someone
be,
who,
I mean, it could be months. I honestly have no idea.
well,
I
I was
mean,
just, I guess I was kind of under the impression this was still like within the first month, but that's just as someone who's watching it for the first time and not having time to analyze it,
yeah.
just because of the way the news is still running. Um,
It could be. It could be. But it's hard to say because is it happening everywhere all at once? Because in one of the news reports it says that there's no dead in Atlanta.
okay.
So it's like, is it happening like one area at a time? Is it like a slow crumble? Is it happening really quickly? It's like you're not really sure. Did it happen
Okay.
in a small town before? And so now, we're a rural area, and then it becomes like, well, that's just the government lies about it and it wasn't really a thing. Or,
Do we know where these movies are set? Like where?
I mean, the first one was supposed to be in the Pennsylvania area, and so I assume that this is the same
Okay.
because they were filmed like in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
um but I don't actually know. And
Okay.
so I think it's easy to say at any point, and I think that's why they kept it so vague,
Right.
because like you building this story in your head is going to be way better than anything else anybody can come up with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so they end up in the mall, and they determine that they're gonna at least restock stuff here, and they're gonna go downstairs. Now Steven is sleeping because he has flown for endless hours.
This is
And
my favorite part because, well,
which
not my
part?
favorite part of the whole movie, but like, I love it when I think it's Fran who's like, "Oh, let me go wake up Steven," and Peter's like, "Leave him be," and like, you could say that's probably because he'd flown all day, but I was thinking, yeah, leave him because he will get us killed
He's
because
an idiot.
he's dumb and he's got horrible aim. And like there was, and I think this is one of the first times, which it's kind of a recurring thing, where they kind of like put down Fran, like is like she's not necessarily their equal. And
Well,
this is
she's
one of those
just a
times,
woman, Aiden.
well, yeah, she should be in the
What is
kitchen,
what is she
but
supposed to do? She's only a woman. Um,
but
I
I
will
just
I will say Romero does not. He's not great at writing women.
hey,
Um,
step up from Barb.
she's way better than Barb. He's not super great at writing women. It gets better over time. But
Mhm.
I don't think he ever really truly encapsulates like a woman. Um, this is
Mhm.
better. This is a lot better because at least she's not like catatonic forever. Uh, but but I get it. Women have weak constitutions. Am I right? Uh, so anyway, we leave Steven and we leave Francine, and Peter's like, Francine, like, this is, I, Peter is my favorite
Mhm. Mhm.
in this movie. He,
Yeah.
he is just, he's the Ben of this movie, really and truly. He's such an advocate for these people. It's like, he's such a champion for them. He, like, tells Francine, like, you can do this. You can do this. You can take the gun. You don't need him to do this for you. Like, just let him sleep. You'll be fine. And I just really love that. So anyway, Peter and Roger head down into the mall. They're going to gather some supplies and they're going to come back. So the mall is filled with the dead. And we'll talk more about why they're so blue. But they end up running to the JC Penney's because the JC that's where you want to be, But department stores back in the day used to have everything. So this is like, it's so cool. So anyway, they are walking around. They go into this like boiler room area where they find keys and walkie-talkies, which they grab. Then they head into the mall through like the back employee area, and they use the keys to get into the JC Penney. Once they're in there, um, they split up and they go look for what they want. They go shopping and they look for what they need. Anyway, they go shopping. So they split up, and while that's happening, Steven is awoken by Francine, who's like, Steven, they've left us. They've gone downstairs and they're doing God knows what. And they can hear like, they can hear like a couple gunshots and stuff coming from downstairs, and Steven's like, they're madmen, and he's just staring at a wall, which I had never really put together, but they're not downstairs, so they're literally just staring at a wall when he says that they're madmen, which is weird. But I guess it's based on like the gunshots and the fact that they went down there without him because he's the linchpin to everything, he thinks.
Because
um
we're mean.
just what in the world. Anyway, so Steven takes the gun from Francine. Don't even get me started on this guy. He takes the gun from Francine. She's literally left with nothing. She's by herself upstairs. No weapon. He takes a gun. He has a secret gun in his waistband. The jerk. You and your two guns? What are you going to do? You can't even shoot with one gun? You're going to have two guns to just blindly shoot?
It's also more concerning when you think about the reveal we get about Fran in a little bit.
He just does not care. Anyway, um, he ends up in the boiler room and he finds a map in a manual, which, like, good on Steven. He's like, he clearly is like the more book smart of everyone, like to think of something like that, He decides to like go through the manuals and look. I'm gonna give him that. I'll give him his due. He's not a complete useless person. Um, and then while he's in there, there is a deadie, just walking around. He was a janitor, apparently. Anyway, Steven's a horrible shot. He's shooting bullets. They're ricocheting all over the place. Which one? Dude, it's like the epicenter of everything that goes on there. You want to lose power in this place, dude?
Yeah, so on that topic, one of the things that bothered me most about this movie, and we've seen it in a couple scenes that we've discussed so far, but I've not really touched on it, is first of all, they are not trying to save bullets whatsoever. Like,
No.
they are just going for it. And the other thing is, I don't know, have they never heard of a melee weapon before? Because I'm like, y'all, come on. Because, and there are times in this movie, and it's happened, I know, because I've got it in my notes here. Somebody's holding a hammer. I don't remember who it is. And they're like, instead of like hitting the zombie with the hammer, they just like chest bump it. And I'm like, that happened multiple times in this movie where I'm like, these are dead corpses trying to kill you. You're not on the football field. Why are you body checking people? What's happening?
I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of body checking that happens in this
There's a
movie.
lot of like, I'm like, I don't know if you just wasted the effects budget and you didn't want to like show any more kills, but
I I don't know. I don't know. They just enjoyed a body check. I'm
they
not
really
sure.
did. They were
I'm
having
not
a
sure.
field day with that.
I mean, they are showcasing that like avoidance is like a really solid tactic if you're good at it. But it does prove that most of them end up being not good at it.
That. And then also
Yeah.
to me, as far as like the zombies that we see, I just they don't make them very scary, I guess, at all. Like it just seems like just the way they're like so willing to like throw their entire body at them at all times like makes me think that they're like not really necessarily that worried about them films
They're
or
not as
other.
big of a threat, it seems, in
Mhm.
this, but we'll get back to that because there is something that's said about that in the movie, and I
Okay.
think Peter has a really good um, perspective on it. So they Steven ends up shooting endlessly at this zombie that's right in front of him and can't kill him. And anyway, Roger and Peter can hear it. But they can't. They're like, I have no idea where that is. It's got to be Flyboy, which I love that they call him Flyboy, and they can't figure out where Steven is. And they're like, well, let's go get him on our side at least, since he's just shooting blindly. Meanwhile, Steven is still fighting with the zombie. He ends up killing it, thank God. And he ends up running out of like the backdoor access area. And there are like 3 zombies right there. One of which is a Hare Krishna, which is interesting. That's the bald guy who's jingling.
Mhm.
That's a Hare Krishna belief system that became really romanticized in the U.S. And they're back in the 70s, Hare Krishnas were a thing, and they walked around and they sold you flowers. Anyway, so there was a Hare Krishna in this mall. It's like a thing of that era specifically, so it's interesting that it's in the movie. Um. Anyway, Peter gives one of his um like speeches to Stephen at this point, and is like, come on, Steven, all you've got to do is just run past him. Steven like won't get past, he just keeps body checking them over and over again. Anyway, he's able to coax Steven out of there. And unfortunately, the Hare Krishna has retained the information that the door opened. Which I find that interesting. They're a little bit smarter in this one.
That's I was actually about to say something about that because I thought it was interesting because they made it sound, or at least, I don't know if this was the actual reason or if it was just their justification of it, but instead of these being people that died at the mall, they made it seem like these were people who like came back to the mall after death because that's what they remembered, which I think's like interesting because it makes me wonder like did they just go to the mall and stay there, or are they going like home every day? Like, are they like leaving, coming
We
home, and then
do
going
we
to
do see
Julius?
some transfer. Like the
Mhm.
doors are open and they're walking in, and then like some of them are leaving. So I do think it's interesting. It's like this idea of the magic of commerce like lasts after death, even this focus on the need for more. And it really was a very ham-fisted way to talk about the fact that overconsumption is an issue in the United States, and we're focused on wanting more. And I get that. I do get that. I'm all for that sentimentality for sure. Um, but it is interesting. Yeah, like they're going to get a Cinnabon and then they're heading on home. Like their workday is done. They
Like,
punched
are they
in
driving?
they punched in their 8 hours of walking around attempting to kill people, and I'm gonna go home to my wife and kids now.
Are they getting in the car and driving home afterwards? Like, these are the things I want to know. Like, I need a post-credit scene of like someone like stopped at a drive-through, like, that's just
So we end up having the 3 gentlemen all together in the pennies, gathering what they need, distracting the zombies to get them to go back down to the first floor, and then waiting them out. And they're gonna sneak out the second floor balcony and head back down. But Peter brings up the fact that he is concerned that if any of them see them go that way, that they will follow and that it'll ruin this whole thing. And he proposes the idea that actually they should stay in the mall. It's a great place to be. You have everything you could possibly need, and as long as they can keep it safe, why not? And this is when Steven does bring up the fact that they could access the air vents and they could use the tunnels to travel through, which is a really great idea. And like, way to go, Steven. It's one of the few things in this movie that you do that is beneficial to other people. So thank you. During this whole time, Francine is alone and this Hare Krishna is coming on up. And he comes on up and she's dangling from the ladder to get back up to the roof. It's grabbing at her feet. The guys finally get back up there after going through the air vents and getting to the employee access, and then going to get their wagon, their little wheelbarrow that they filled with stuff, and they head upstairs. They have a discussion that evening after they save Francine from the Hare Krishna that they are going to stay. Francine's not a part of this conversation. She's in the other room, but they're going to stay. And Peter's like, I'm worried about her. She seems like she's physically not okay. And Steven's like, well, she's pregnant and she's like 3 or 4 months and I'm clearly not happy about it. Basically. And Peter can pick up on that vibe and is like, do you want to get rid of the baby? Because I know how to do that, which is what?
This
What?
scene was one of those parts in the movie where I was like,
You know how to
"Ooh,
do that? What are you gonna punch her in the stomach? Like, what do you mean? I
I'm
did not care for that. It was a very weird.
this whole scene was something like, in a way, I appreciated the concept because I think that these discussions are realistic for what would happen if people were
Mm,
presented in this situation. You know, would you want to bring life into that world? This is something we've seen in, other forms of zombie media as time's gone on.
yeah.
But I think the obvious thing is that the person that the kid is inside of is not a part of this conversation, which was wild to me. And I was like, if I were her, I'd just go out there and shoot every single one of those guys.
I love that she does speak up, though. She does speak up about it. It takes her a little while, but Stephen comes in to check on her, and she's like, so have you made up all your mind about everything? You made all your decisions already? Which I love. And then she does vocalize to all the men, I want to be a part of this. I'm a
Mhm.
person. I don't care that I'm pregnant. I deserve a say in what we're doing, and I want to be informed of what's happening. And they come upon an agreement that that is fine, but that she is not allowed to leave until she learns how to shoot.
Which, okay, first of all, is total BS because Steven can't shoot. He can pull a
No,
trigger,
he
but
can't
he can.
either.
I would pick Fran over him any day.
Yes, hands
This
down.
is kind of my notes when I wrote this for Fran.
I did love that that he, like, she does bring up the fact that that Steven's the only one who knows how to fly. And so until she can learn, he shouldn't leave either then. It's great logic. Thank you, Francine, for being a voice of reason. Steven is so pissed that he can't be one of the boys. He's so angry about it. But it's fair. It's a valid concern, and someone else does need to learn how to fly.
Mm.
Um, so now we move on to some time has passed, and they're gonna lock down the mall. So they come up with a plan in which Peter and Roger go get some big trucks from, like, it's like a parking lot. It's like a working parking lot, like next to the mall. And so they get the trucks, and then Steven's gonna follow them in the chopper, which I'm not really sure why, other than
I
it
was
wastes
so that
fuel.
was one of
Yeah,
the times
I
we
get. I
were
mean, if something went wrong, he could, like, I guess, land and get them. I guess is kind of the thought. It's a little weird, but and Francine is on the roof with a gun to be able to help when she can. Um, It was a smart idea. They block off the doors with the trucks. So they have to make a couple trips back and forth where they're getting hot wiring trucks, driving them over, parking them in front of the doors. So it was a good idea. Unfortunately, Roger is not okay mentally at this point. It there he showcases some pretty evident like mania, and he ends up just it's kind of like it kind of mirrors that beginning scene with Wooly at the
Mm.
apartment raid where he kind of flies off the handle and goes kind of crazy. So he gets like a little too worked up and wild, and his hollering and hooting caused some zombies to come on over while he's hot wiring one of the trucks, and he has like a near death experience because a female zombie almost does kill him, and it's like he doesn't get it together after that. And I think you probably should have just ended that day. You know, Peter should have been like, no, we're going back. Like, we'll come back and do this tomorrow. Like, you need some time. But Roger says he's fine. And so they figure, let's just keep going. Well, Roger drops his bag. Who cares, dude? Who cares about your bag? There cannot be anything in that you cannot get again in the mall. Unless there's like a picture of your mom in there. Like, I don't know. Is it really
Yeah,
like necessary?
if there was something sentimental in that, I think that would have
Well, then,
been.
like, you could get it later, right? Does it have to be gotten at that exact moment?
That's true too. Yeah.
I don't know. It seemed really foolish. Anyway, as we all know, he ends up getting bit as a result several times. Um, and so they bring him back, and he ends up living in the wheelbarrow. He lives in the wheelbarrow for a little bit. He's their wheelbarrow friend. And they do have to do a couple things yet. So the trucks, they get all the trucks in front of the doors. That's all taken care of. But they do need to lock the doors, set the alarms, and clear out all of the dead bodies. Like kill them all and then clear them out. So there's a lot of work to be done. And so Roger, valiant to his death, does say, there's work to be done. Let me help while I'm still here. And so they wheel him around in his little wheelbarrow, and they they do all of the above. They lock the doors, they set the alarms, they kill all the dead, they get all the bodies out of there, and the mall is now secured and it's theirs. And they nurse Roger in the room that's upstairs until he passes, and then he turns and Peter kills him because that's what he asked for. So it's sad because it's one of our main characters and we only have 4 of them, and now one's gone, which is sad. Anyway, it goes on for I think a substantial amount of time passes. They renovate the upstairs. It becomes like a little apartment. Everyone seems kind of like annoyed with each other. Francine and Steven are not getting along anymore. She becomes more visibly pregnant, so we can assume she's probably like 6 to 7 months in at this time. She's got quite the belly on her. And at this time, the helicopter is spotted on the roof, which was a concern that was brought up earlier. Now, I said I would get back to something, and I didn't mention it just now, but it happens before Roger dies. Roger and Steven, actually, I think it's Steven who brings it up. Steven talks about how, like, there's not too many of them down there. It's not too bad. Like, the dead, like, they're so slow. I didn't think it would be that easy to get around them. And Peter is very clear, like, that they are lucky to have made it as far as they did, and that they really need to keep that in mind. And I think that's a super important perspective to have, because what this movie does is it really kind of glosses over that, and it becomes very much like they did the damn thing, they have their little fort, and it's not that big of a deal. They're fine. The world isn't that unsafe. But that's not true. And I would think, much like we see a lot in The Walking Dead, where they talk about, like, I don't want to become soft over time if you're too safe. Like, I think that's what ends up happening if you're not out there, like, fighting it every day. So when the chopper is spotted and a gang of bikers featuring one Tom Savini, the head of special effects for this movie, and by the way, that was an actual biker gang
Oh,
called the
really?
called the Pagans. Someone found them and asked them if they wanted to be in a movie, and they brought their own motorcycles. So that saved on budget. Um, anyway, they decide that they want the mall for themselves, but do they? Because they destroy the doors. So really, they just want to ransack it and leave.
Yeah, I was very confused by this whole thing, and do you know what Letterboxd is?
Letterbox, no.
Okay, well, it's a movie review app,
Okay.
and my friends and I use it. You know, you can make lists and rankings, and you rate things out of 5 stars, and you can review it. And a lot of the reviews aren't like genuine, like analytical reviews. A lot of them are just like silly things that you think of while the movie. So the review I put for this movie was this biker gang would go on to the goons for the Joker in the 1989 Batman, because I don't know if you remember that movie, but all I could think of, because they literally just go and start destroying stuff, and all I could think about was that scene in 1989 Batman, Jack Nicholson Joker, when
hmm
they go into the art gallery and he's like, "Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds, Lawrence." And they start playing Prince and just start like ruining everything in the building. And that's all I got, because I'm like,
Yeah.
what is happening? And I was like, you always hear about looting and things of that nature.
hmm
But to me, I was just like, y'all just breaking stuff. And I was like, they got power here. They got working escalators.
I
You could
know.
watch TV. You know what I mean? Like,
I
what y'all
mean,
do?
they're clearly like nomadic in nature, this group, which is fine. Um, but it is interesting. They're just there to like cause general havoc and steal things and then leave. And I love that they're stealing stupid things like cash and jewelry, because it's just
And
like,
checking your blood pressure.
why not? The blood pressure thing was so funny.
That's
What I
really
love is that when they're radioing in to say like, "There's just three of us, let us in," and Peter's like, "Don't. These guys are militia, mini military." And then like they don't act like that at all. And it's like they seem really
funny.
unprofessional actually. They're not very good at this and a bunch of them die. There are some great kills in this scene. So really it was just a way to show off special effects in the movie, which is awesome. Um, and so there's a big shootout. There's a ton of zombies that end up getting back into the mall, and essentially the mall is overrun. During this time, and see, this wouldn't have happened either had Steven just calmed down. But Steven didn't calm down. You hear him say, "This is ours. It was ours. We took it." It's not really yours, dude. It's a mall. All of this stuff belonged to somebody else before you took it. So it's not yours. But he was so adamant on that he ends up firing first, and it results in them losing the entire mall. Stephen also loses his life during this. He ends up getting shot. He is trying. He's almost out of the way of dying when the elevator opens and a ton of zombies come in and bite him. By the time the elevator ends up opening again, Stephen has turned, and the actor David Emge ends up performing one of the best zombies I've ever seen. That performance was great. He walked on like the side of his ankle. It was good. The man was good. He was committed. It was really great. Um, so during this sequence, now Peter has gone upstairs and he's hiding with Francine, and they think maybe they can just wait it out. They've built a wall to cover the entrance, which was super smart, so nobody would know that there was like a way back there. However, the zombies seem to retain some sort of memory of things, because Steven walks towards that hallway and ends up breaking through that wall. So he clearly knew it was there. Um, my husband brought up a really good point during this when we were watching this movie again, because we've both seen it like a bajillion times. He had said He said, I've never thought about this before, but there's like a really weird, it's like a dissonant version of the music that plays at the beginning of the movie when they turn on all the lights and stuff for the mall. There's like a dissonant version of it that begins. And and he was like, do you think that's playing in Steven's head?
Mm.
Like, is that like a memory? Because it's not playing at any other point on, it's only playing when you're from like his perspective or we're seeing him.
Huh. Never
So
noticed that.
I thought it was really interesting. Um, and so anyway, he ends up getting upstairs and they kill him, but it's too late. There are more zombies in there. And then we get a really weird sequence of events in which Francine runs upstairs and she starts up the chopper. And then Peter is maybe going to kill himself
Okay.
for reasons unbeknownst to anyone.
I'm glad you said that because I was so confused by that because
It's
I was like,
weird.
he seemed like the least likely person to do that. And trust me, I mean, none of us have obviously lived in a zombie apocalypse, but I think we can all imagine how traumatic that would be.
Yeah.
And but it was never clear to me, or at least I don't remember any lines of dialogue about people he lost or him
So,
or anything
well,
like
he
that.
only has brothers, remember? Because Francine asks, like, the really inappropriate question, are they really his brothers or are they like
Oh,
his brothers at the beginning? And he says both. I have both. But you don't get any like I'm leaving, yeah, I'm not leaving like the love of my life. I didn't lose my children, like nothing like that. It actually has more to do with the original ending.
okay.
So we'll talk more on that in just a moment. But anyway, he determines that no, the the will of man is more than that, and he will claw his way out. And anyway, he ends up getting to the chopper, and off they fly. And that's the end of the movie. They're off. They've got a little bit of fuel. Where are they going to go? Not really sure. Um, but it gives you hope that survival will win out in the end. And that's the end of the movie. And I know it sounded like I was making fun of it a lot because I was a little bit, but it is still my favorite zombie movie. I do really enjoy it. There's some really great parts to it, including one of the best lines ever said in any zombie movie ever, which is when there's no room left in hell, the dead will walk the earth. That is just, it's so good. It's such a good line. Okay, so let's talk fun facts. And we'll start from the end. This movie had two endings. That was all Romero had when he first started writing it. It was two endings. He had the ending that I guess he ended up with, but he also ended up with an ending in which, and this was prepped for, an ending in which Peter killed himself and Francine threw herself into the blades of the chopper. And it cut off her head, much like the head of the zombie that we see earlier in the movie. In fact, they had a special effect cast of Galen Ross's head that they painted and covered in facial hair, and it is the head that blows up at the beginning of the movie with the shotgun blast.
Yeah.
Tom Savini filled it with all sorts of things. He said he filled it with condoms, um, shrimp cocktail sauce, things from the craft table. He filled it with all sorts of stuff, and he filled it absolutely full, and then wrapped it with plastic at the bottom. So when they flipped it, it didn't ooze out the bottom, and that's what they shot, and that's why it exploded like that. Speaking of the chopper zombie, that was actually a friend of Tom Savini's who had always been told his whole life that he had a low forehead. So that was the guy they decided to use because he had to build like more forehead on. So he needed someone with like a short forehead, I guess. So apparently, Tom Savini, he was wanted for Night of the Living Dead, but he had gone to Vietnam. I didn't know this, but he was a combat photographer. That's how he served. And
Hmm.
so he said that he took that experience of photographing like horrific things that had happened, because it was like you took photos of like damage to the machinery, but you also took photos of like damage to people.
Okay.
And he said he used that, he like compartmentalized it and was able to like put it into play for special effects. That's why he can get like really gory, realistic stuff
Hmm.
because of that, which I thought was interesting. The mall they're in is the Monroeville Mall. It was owned by friends of Romero. So they own this mall, and this was one of the first indoor malls that existed in America. Okay. So his friends own it, and they give him a tour, and he's walking around, and they show him like these little like passageways and stuff. They would be like kind of like cubbies, like cubby holes, and they were saying that you could survive a nuclear blast in these buildings, which is not even remotely true. But
Hmm.
so it got him thinking about like, oh, could you survive a zombie outbreak in a building like this? And so that's where the inspiration came from. Now you'll notice that this is a quite a bit of time after Night of the Living Dead came out, because that's late 60s, this is late 70s, so it's almost 10 years. And the reason behind that was Night of the Living Dead had done really well, and people were coming to him saying like, we want you to make our next movie, we want to make another one. And he was like, I don't want to just jump on this, like I like want to have a good idea if I'm going to do this. And so he really let it like marinate for a long time. This was filmed in I think it was late 76. I think it was 76 and a 77. And as a result, or maybe it was 75 and a 76, I don't remember, but as a result, it was Christmas time. Okay. The mall is still open, it's functioning while they're filming. They're only allowed to film at night. They're only given 8 hours to film, and everything has to be cleaned up each morning before people come in. Now, when they film during Christmas time, they have to take down all of the Christmas decorations and then put them back up, which is eating into this 8 hours. Right. And like most filming takes like 12 hours or more. So the fact that they were cut down to 8 hours like was really, really, really tight schedule. And so they went on a 3-week hiatus before Christmas because like they just couldn't do it anymore. And they waited until Christmas season was over to finish filming the movie. When Romero decided he was going to film this, he just sent a telegram to Savini that just said, think of new ways to kill people.
Yeah.
So we're making a new movie, think of new ways to kill people. So Dario Argento's name is put all over this movie as like producer, and it's because he funded this film. So Dario Argento was involved in making movies in Italy, huge fan of Night of the Living Dead. And he decided that he wanted to fund Romero's next project. And so he flew Romero out to Rome for three for like 3 weeks, and Romero was put up in a little apartment and he worked on the script. And so each day when he was done, there would be someone who come take script pages and they would translate them into Italian and they would give them to Dario Argento and he would read it. And then they would go out for dinner and they would like talk about it, but like there'd have to be a translator. And Romero's wife, I think her name's Christine, she's like, she talks about it in an interview and she talks about how like they did a lot of this like body language while they were talking because they couldn't talk to each other. So the great the line, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Romero came up with it when he was drunk one night. He was trying to finish the script. He said to Rolling Stone in 1978, I just made that up, truly, on a drunken night when I was really crashing to finish the script, and I thought that was kind of nice. It was from something Dario Argento told me. My family is Cuban, and Dario said, well, you have a Caribbean background, and that's why you're into the zombie thing. Zombies originated in Haiti. I said, well, all right, and I just figured that's something a voodoo priest might say. I'm just having fun, man. That's what he said back in 1978.
Wow, that's interesting though, because it is such a good
It's a
line,
great
and
line.
you think about it, it's such an interesting concept too.
Mhm.
What I noticed, before I watched the film, I went and looked, just glanced, something, and I saw that was the tagline on most of the posters that I saw. I'm like, as it should be, because that is
It's the
so
best line.
good.
It's the best line in the movie. And honestly, it resonates with me from like that like Christian background. I love when they do like nods to Christianity in zombie movies. I just think it's really interesting. One of my favorite lines from The Walking Dead is when Herschel says the thing about um
Christ promised resurrection from the dead, but I just thought he had something different in
yes,
mind.
yes, it's like the best line. It's so good. Because I don't know, it's something like for me as a Christian, like I find the zombie apocalypse happening. One, it's like not scientifically possible, but then also like on a faith based belief system, like it wouldn't be something that would happen. And so when they include things like that, it's like this really cool like way to like pull me back in, where I'm like, well, maybe I don't know. I just really
But yeah, and
enjoy.
I think such a large portion of the world um, are religious, and not just with Christianity, but
Yeah,
different religions. And I think it's an interesting concept because I think that, especially like the apocalypse happening and all the horrific things that come with that, like seeing your loved ones torn apart, or
yeah,
seeing people go become cannibals, or these horrible, things that we've seen over the years. It's gonna rock your world, and it's gonna make you question, like,
so how do you stand
whatever
faithful?
you believe in, in this case Christianity. Like, it kind of reminds me, going to another project that's kind of zombie adjacent, the film version of The Mist. When
Mm,
you've seen it, right?
yeah,
Where that it's been a while, but when the biker walks out and he's leaving the building or whatever, and he looks at Marcia Gay Harden, he says something along the lines of like, "I believe in God. I just don't think he's the uh, asshole or something you make him out to be, or something," because she's using that as a way to manipulate the others.
you know,
Which I just think it's an interesting thread to really like go that route and question those things, and see that through the lenses of these characters.
yeah. It's just such an iconic line, and it does actually come into play in the remake. They do pay homage to that moment in the 2004 remake, which I talk constant trash about, but honestly it's not that bad, guys. I'm not a hater. It's just that it's not this one, and this one is better in my opinion. And I love that he came up with it off the top of his head, and he was drunk, and it's like there wasn't some big grandiose plan behind it. That makes it even better in my opinion.
I think you wanted to talk about why the zombies were blue.
Oh, why were they blue? Yes, that is interesting, isn't it? So, in person, they looked different. Tom Savini had said he wanted kind of like a gray skin for them, which makes
Because
sense
we don't really
uh,
know what they look like in Night of the Living Dead because of the
because of the black and
um
white. So
yeah.
I think he really was like, well, we'll do kind of like a gray that'll look like dead. But they did blue like undertones to try to get it to look the right way. Well, unfortunately, on film, it caught the blue. You can't go back and redo it if you've shot a bunch of scenes and that's what it's showing up as. So it was like too little, too late. It had already happened, and so they had to go for it. Tom Savini hated it. He hated it. He was not happy about it. Um, but yeah, they are actually gray, even though they do look blue. It just
But
didn't.
they were auditioning for the Blue Man Group.
It just didn't happen that way. Um, a lot of the another one of the things. Okay, so Tom Savini did a bunch of the stunts himself. He was just a jack of all trades in this movie. He's acting, he's doing all the special effects, he's doing stunts like with the trucks and stuff. Um, so that is pretty cool. But I wanted to talk about the fact that the zombies. You have to think. So now there's like zombie school you can go to, right? They'll like send you to a day class and you learn about how to walk like the undead and how to sound and how to move your body and all of that kind of stuff. That didn't exist back then because this wasn't really a thing. So you have to think Night of the Living Dead, and now even in this, they're all just coming up with stuff on their own. So any movement that you saw that was like spectacular, that was the actor, whoever they were, even if they were an extra. It was them coming up with their own thing, which is why I love that performance by David Emge at the end, because that's all him. He came up with that. He came up with the walking on his ankle, the rigidity of his steps. Like he came up with all of that.
So I wonder if that one zombie who's walking around with that gun aimed at his own head
Oh my
for
god,
most of
that was
the movie.
hilarious.
And I
I
like
love
that
that he
at the
switches guns.
end, I love when he gets two, and you can just tell it made his day. He's thrilled. He's so happy to be there.
It was so funny. Yeah, it's great. I just loved it.
Or that one
So
zombie
there
who like continuously gets stuck on the escalator. He's like on the escalator for like 80% of the movie. Like every time it pans back the escalator, you just
Oh
see
my
him
god, where
like.
he keeps like turning around and yeah, I know, it's so good. So there was no gun store in the mall. That was like a separate gun store. It was in like downtown Pittsburgh. And so that's just snazzy editing to make it look like there was a gun store in the mall. How convenient that they had one though. There was a there okay, so I didn't find out for sure what this was. I heard two different things. I heard that extras were paid $1, given a donut and a Dawn of the Dead t-shirt. And I also heard that they were given $20, a box lunch, and a Dawn of the Dead t-shirt. So either way, you weren't getting paid much, you got something to
Yeah.
eat, and you got a t-shirt. This wasn't a low budget movie. 1.5 million, which equates to 6 million today. So it was not a small budget. It was a fairly large budget for a horror movie. But you can tell, right? Like these ideas were really grandiose. That you would do this in a mall, like that there was a helicopter. There's like these really big ideas that happen in it. The whole biker gang driving their motorcycles through the mall. I mean, driving a car through the mall. Like these are all really huge things that happened in the movie.
I wonder if, like the people that worked there or like the people that gave the approval to let them shoot at the mall. Like, I mean, I would imagine they probably knew most of the stuff going on, like as far as like motorcycle gang driving through there.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
like, part of me likes to imagine that they didn't know, and then when they went to see the movie, they were like, "What the?"
They did have to so apparently some of the guys used to get drunk at one of the bars in the mall. And apparently they stole a golf cart one night and drove it into one of the marble pillars. And they did have to pay $7,000 in damages. So it wasn't all fun, I guess.
So one of the facts that I read, and again, I don't know the validity of it. I didn't do a lot of like resource checking, but was that the attention all shoppers, like the intercom voice at the mall, was
Mm.
Romero's wife.
Oh, okay. So Christine Romero,
Mm-hmm.
very cool, very very cool. It
Again,
did
I'd have
crack me
to
up.
fact
The
check that, but
free bag of hard candy things did crack me up. I was laughing pretty hard about that.
kill of the week.
Kill of the week. Insert kill of the week. We all agree it's helicopter zombie, right?
Helicopter zombie. Yeah, that's
Clear.
not even a contest.
No.
Dearly departed. Is there any like specific death you want to talk about? Maybe the saddest death, best death?
I mean,
Because really, I feel like this one we really only have the two. You know what I
you
mean?
really do only have the two. I will say Roger's death it's unsettling. One, whoa, what a zombie. Holy cow.
Yeah.
When he
And
comes back
that
and
was
his
one of
face
the
is
things
like
I've seen.
withered.
I've seen that image before everywhere, and I didn't realize that it was from this. And it was one of those things that it didn't register until it happened. Like it wasn't like I was like, "Oh, this looks like that zombie that I see in that picture all the time." It
Okay.
was just I was like, "Oh,
Oh, that's where this is from.
yeah."
Yeah. It's I mean both deaths are sad for different
Mhm.
reasons, right? Like Stevens is sad because he let he let being emasculated in his own insecurities and his masculinity and the wanting to like own everything thing get the best of him. So he died for a foolish reason, and Roger died because he just kind of succumbed. He had succumbed to the way that the world was,
Yeah.
and so it's just they're both just really sad deaths. Um, they're both believable to a certain extent too, so kind of makes sense. And I'm glad that we don't lose Francine or Peter because I think that ending would have been God. That would have been a real downer.
So before we get to our superior survivor, I
Okay.
that's kind of something I want to talk a little bit more about is this
Okay.
alternate ending. What do you think? I mean, clearly you said you prefer the ending that we got.
Yes.
Um, but I just wonder what a world like that would have looked like. And I think again, I'm also glad because on the surface, it would have been way too similar to what we saw in the end of Night of the Living Dead with losing our entire cast, and also with our last character there being a very unfortunate death. People mistaking him, or maybe not mistaking him, for a zombie at the end of that film.
Mm,
Um, it was nice not to see two of our characters kill themselves after the events.
yeah.
Um, Especially, I think, because in this world compared to things that I've seen, so The Walking Dead or some of the more modern takes on the zombie franchise, these zombies, this seems like a world you could maybe come back from, maybe, like, compared to the other ones, I guess. So it was nice to not see them go that route. um I just don't think the movie would have been as good if that would have been the case, because
Yeah.
I think one of my chief complaints with Night of the Living Dead, as much as I enjoyed it, was it was just like, bam, everybody's dead, all right, roll credits, go home everybody.
Hmm.
you know um and I think this, brings more conversation and more thought to it. You can, maybe they go to an island, an undetermined island.
Any island.
Maybe
Um,
they're like, hey man, we're gonna show. Maybe they showed the same island he went to, and they're like, hey man, we do have cigarettes and more gum for
um,
you to possibly chew on.
yeah, I know. I wonder if they end up going north because that was a topic of conversation. Because I know Steven was going to take them to Canada initially. Yeah, it's interesting.
Do you think she learned how to fly?
She,
Because I mean,
yeah, like
she
well
okay.
enough. Yeah. I don't think she was like an expert at it by any
I didn't know if
means,
she was
but
just like winging it or what she,
they did
because
work a little bit on her flying and landing and stuff, so I assume that they spent enough time on it that she felt at least confident to get them out of there, which is great. And it gives you a hope, right? Like that humanity can continue, um, and that we all don't need to succumb to consumerism, like because that's really the like I said the ham-fisted analogy for this.
yeah, and it makes me wonder too because you pointed out there is like a time skip in the movie,
Hmm.
um, and it makes me wonder because at least it's if it did happen, it's not clear, and I think it would have been mentioned if the group of hunters or just other survivors besides the biker gang stumbled upon them, um, and it does seem that the world probably fell worse than what we get to see at the end, just because
Mm.
at the beginning we see all these people going out and taking out the zombies, and especially because they're slower, you'd think that they probably, especially if it's not the whole, even the whole country, because we talked about, you said something about it not being in Atlanta. You'd think they would have reached that point by now, to where they
you
would have
th-
got through
you
there.
would
You know what I mean?
think, yeah, it is interesting because you find out in that scene after the time skip where Stephen and Francine are fighting over the TV being on, that nothing is aired for 3 days. So is everyone gone? Like what happened?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely makes you, for some more interesting thought-provoking matter as far as where is everyone else,
Yeah.
because especially in the shots that we saw, there were enough people for them to feel pretty comfortable about just hanging around talking. You know, they weren't like constantly on the defense.
Yeah.
The people we saw looked like they weren't having a bad time. You know, they weren't like upset or So I think it's interesting to wonder what what happened. That we didn't see
Yeah.
uh, as well.
So I'm gonna share why this is my favorite zombie movie. Because I think it's easy. Like you watch it and you're like, this is okay. Why do people refer to this as like the zombie movie? Um, there is something so fun about this in such a dark material source, right? Like talking about the end of the world. And there's just something so fun about the idea of being with a group of, I mean, forced buddies, right? You're forced to deal with each other and being able to kind of do whatever you want, take whatever you want. They get to go shopping. Francine's doing her makeup all crazy, and there's just something fun about it. On top of that, I really enjoy like how much of it seems so kind of silent, even though it's not. Um, the fact that there's not a ton of interaction with other people. I really enjoy that about this, that like you would be able to find a place to hole up and hide away from everyone. Um, it just something about it really speaks to me, and I don't know if it's like this juvenile like 13-year-old Bridget who really loved them all like thing, because in my teens is when I really got into horror movies. And when I say horror movies, like, you guys, I do not mean scary horror movies. I don't mean movies that used to like I'm so easily scared. If you knew me in high school, if you knew me shortly after high school, I was scared of movies so easily. Uh, I would watch old black and white like Frankenstein and stuff, and I would watch these like Night of the Living Dead. Like, I was afraid to go to the bathroom after I watched it. These are not like over the top terrifying movies, but I was so sensitive to that I really struggled watching horror movies, but I really got into the Universal monsters, and then from there it became like this thing where I really got into zombie movies. And I loved these movies even though they terrified me. And so when I was watching this movie the other day, we were originally going to record the other day, the power went off during the middle of this movie, and I was like legitimately scared for a minute, because then I hear sirens and then I'm like, oh my god, did it start? Is it happening right now? Which is so stupid,
They're
but
coming to get you, Bridget.
it's immediately what I jump to. I'm always like, oh my god, did the zombie apocalypse start? It started, didn't it? It started, and I don't even know it. How do I find out? And then I'm like peeking out my blinds, like looking to see if there's any like undead walking around, because that's always my go-to. Is like, obviously there would just be undead walking around in the neighborhood. I live in the middle of nowhere. There would not be undead walking around, but it is automatically my go-to. But anyway, this this just this is just one of those movies that's really stuck with me. The soundtrack is great. It was done by the band Goblin. Um, it's great. It's got really good like dissonance, and it's like unsettling, like a lot of the music in it. Kind of off-putting, and so it gives you that sense of being like tingly and like on the edge for the bulk of the movie. You're like constantly waiting for something to go wrong. I just think it's a really great classic horror movie. And then you add in the best line of any zombie movie I've ever seen, and I'm over the moon. I hold it in high regard, in high regard. But you have yet to see what else is coming down this road. It's not all good. It's not all good. You have yet to see the bottom of the pits that we will get to over time, Hayden. And you'll look back on this and you'll be like, you know what? That was a really great movie. Is there are really bad zombie movies out there?
I am cautiously optimistic to see where we go from here.
Really bad zombie movies out there. Yeah. So one of my favorites. I often, when I'm asked what is my favorite movie, and I mean like in just not what's your favorite horror movie, not what's your favorite zombie movie, but what is your favorite movie? It is usually this is my answer.
That's interesting.
I love this movie. I love other movies. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes my answer is Sweet Home Alabama. It depends on how I'm feeling, but I really love fried green tomatoes, steel magnolias.
Oh,
Um, I
yeah.
love a lot of movies. I've seen a lot of movies in my life, but this stands to be probably one of my favorites of all time, and it is often my favorite movie. It's funny because my husband's favorite movie is actually Night of the Living Dead original. So
Oh,
we found each other.
that's cute.
Oh, we bonded over weird stuff.
Oh, that's cute.
So I don't know if your opinion has changed on it at all with my impassioned speech.
I mean, I've definitely, the more that we've talked about it, the more, I mean, I do enjoy it more than I did after the first watch. And I think, that is something I'm really looking forward to, is because I think even if I don't enjoy a movie or it's clearly like bad, um, I think the discussions that we are going to have about these films or pieces of zombie media is going to make them better or at least worth the watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and this was worth the watch regardless. But I think talking
Well,
out, learning some
it's an
seeing
iconic
stuff,
piece. You like had
yeah,
to see it, I feel like.
it makes me like respect a lot of the behind the scenes, like having the clothes for Christmas and stuff like that, like just cool little stuff like that. Such
Yeah.
interesting little tidbits. um and there are moments that we've discussed some that I can definitely see where other pieces of zombie media have drawn the inspiration from. um like anytime you see a mall in a zombie movie, things like that, now it harkens back to this,
Yep.
which I think is really interesting. And
I think it's
obviously some.
easy to watch it and be like, this is such a trope, but like he set the trope.
Well, see, that's one of the things, and I had these thoughts a lot watching this movie, especially like um when is his name Roger, when he gets um bit and stuff like that. I was like, well, obviously they need to put him down. And I was like thinking, and I was like, well, they probably don't know that. They probably don't know. I was like, and I couldn't remember if it was something that was said on the news, but I was like, they probably don't know that they need to put him down. And then I was like, well, hell, maybe in this universe they don't have to. Maybe they don't come back. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where I was like,
They're just
maybe
waiting to find out.
right, maybe he doesn't come back, or maybe you're jumping the gun, or maybe he does and they're not aware.
Well, he didn't
Uh,
want to. I
so it's
I did love
interesting.
his speech to Peter.
Mm.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try really hard to not come back. I mean, that was heartbreaking. That was heartbreaking, but this movie has such like goofy, well, almost like slapstick, like Benny Hill style, like comedy at some
Well, I think
points.
that's why it was jarring for me at times, because you have like scenes like a biker gang coming in throwing pies in the face of zombies, and then you also have scenes where three men are discussing aborting a woman's baby and she's not even in the room.
I
So it
know.
was like you have scenes that are so like so serious and so
Hmm.
sincere and so just camp and whack. And I think that's one of the reasons that I, felt a little middle of the road on it, is because for every moment that I liked and respected, there was a moment I was like, why are we doing this?
Huge
Uh,
tonal shifts, but
mhm,
horror wasn't what we see now.
right,
So in order to sell it, you had to like sugar it up a little bit, and that's where that like comedy comes in. It's almost like you were fearful your audience wouldn't swallow it if it was too dark the whole time.
right. And one of the things I read about, and I didn't read a lot about it, but I kind of glanced, was that Romero was threatened with an X rating if he didn't make some alterations and cuts.
They
And it
actually
makes,
released it unrated as a result. Yeah,
did
they
they?
released it unrated. They were like, "Eh, screw it," and so this had no rating. Um, and yeah, yeah, yeah. He was threatened with the X rating, but it had a lot of gore. It did. I mean, there was a lot of blood, a lot of bites, a lot of ripping of flesh. I mean, there was some. there was some sick stuff in this movie. My hat's
Mhm.
off to Tom Savini. He set the bar really high for practical effects, and he really got to show a lot of that off in this, which is great. So our next movie will be Day of the Dead. And Aiden, you'll get to meet Bob, which is just such a special experience. I can't wait. If you think this is campy, just hold on to your butt. So we're gonna watch something special next.
Oh gosh. Who was your superior survivor of this film?
Oh, yes, the superior survivor. Honestly, I'm inclined to say Peter. Peter was my favorite.
Okay.
Now, I like Francine because she's not Barbara. So automatically she's like way better. No, I like Francine because she stands up for herself and she's a little bit tougher than I think you're initially shown. I like that she gets a little bit of grit. I don't think that it was enough grit.
Hmm.
Had she been a little bit grittier, had they made her a little bit tougher, I think maybe I would have really fallen in love with that character. But Peter is my favorite because he is, like I said, he's such a champion for everyone else. Like, I don't mean like he's the champion like he would. I mean like he champions them on. And I just love that he has like that we can do this together like mentality. There's something just really endearing about it. He's tough, he's no nonsense. He's logical, he's smart. Like Francine wants to let like the bikers in. She's like, well, if it's only three people, and he's like, no, they're lying. Like, I just love that he's so no nonsense. Um, he's smart, and I think we're really meant to kind of relate to him in that way. Like, he's the one who's gonna stay calm and cool and collected. And that's who you want to be. Who is yours?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious answer, like you said, is Peter. I mean, he was definitely my favorite, and I think he made the right choices. But I do want to mention Fran as well, because I think that as far as being a survivor goes, and even though some of it may not have necessarily been her choice, she was away from a lot of the dangerous action, you know, and I respected that at the end of the film, she was willing to leave him there
Yeah.
um, when she thought he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And she waited pretty much as long as she could, and then he came out. But I respected that because especially after coming off seeing a character like Barbara in Night of the Living Dead, she probably would have just got out and been like, "Eat me," or just like not moved. So I respected that she was like, "I mean, I'm leaving. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna give you all the time I got, and then we can go." And I also
Yeah.
respected like we talked about earlier when she was like, well, you shouldn't leave either because, you're the only one that knows how to fly. And I think that she was looking to the future, maybe more so than some of the other characters.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, she had to, right? Like she's pregnant,
mhm,
so she has to
mhm,
start thinking about beyond herself.
mhm,
Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, his female writing gets better over time. She is a lot more likable than Barbara, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the next movie. That character is even more likable than this. So I think, yeah, it's just something that came with time, I guess. He had to be married longer, apparently, to know.
um,
To know how to write for a woman. I mean, I get it. You're writing for the opposite gender. Like, I can only imagine if I tried to write for a dude, I'd probably be putting in bra like every other word. It would be so stupid. It's like I'm not a guy, so like, am I really gonna be able to write for one? Probably not. It'll just be like simplistic, like cliches that I've come to understand about men over time. It's like it's the same thing. I cannot fault the man for it. Um, I think she could have been better, but she was a voice of reason when she needed to be, and so yeah, she gets like what's the runner up? What's the runner up on
the
this?
silver medal, the silver survivor. I
The
don't know.
silver survivor. It's like Silver Surfer, but it's just Fran's head on it.
the, the honorable mention.
All right, so buckle up for Day of the Dead.
What's your rating?
I give this 100 shotguns shots exploding ahead out of 100.
I'm gonna give it 3 blood pressure machines out of 5.
Blood pressure machine.
Also, did you see that Mario zombie? You know what I'm talking about? There's a zombie that has a red shirt on and blue overalls in this movie. That is all. I had that in my notes.
It's a me, zombie. It's been a me, a Punky Brewster, and Aiden. YouTube name to be determined. And this has been Zombification Education 101, an introductory course, Dawn of the Dead, 1978.
Session number 2.
Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time with Day of the Dead. So watch it in preparation. Okay, bye.
I'm gonna try not to. I'm gonna try not to come back. I'm gonna try.